Welcome back to Sip&Talk.
Hey, why are you so mushy today? You must be in a good mood, right?
I am in a great mood.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to Sip&Talk.
Welcome, welcome. Folks, this topic today, we were originally planning to save it, like for our 500th show or something.
Oh yeah, this was supposed to be the final boss level, the big one.
But we got to talking and, well, this question is just too absurd, too funny, and honestly too philosophical to just let it sit on a shelf.
We couldn't wait. It's too good.
So today, we're giving it to you early.
And the key thing here is this wasn't our idea. This came directly from one of our listeners in China.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and they asked, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, when people are dying, some see Jesus, some see the Buddha, but if one day, just hypothetically, of course President Xi were dying, who would he see?
I mean, what a question, right? We talked about this for so long.
We really did.
Because, you know, his entire life is about emphasizing and implementing the thoughts of Marx and Lenin. So
yeah.
Does that mean he'd see Marx and Lenin themselves, like, waiting for him?
And what would that look like? Is Marx just kind of rolling his eyes? Is Lenin gesturing for him to come have a seat for a little chat?
A little performance review, maybe?
Exactly. Okay. But right up front, we have to put up the big disclaimer.
Absolutely. Go for it.
This entire thought experiment is purely for fun. It's humorous, it's fictional, it is satirical.
It does not involve religious or political reality.
Okay.
This is not a prediction. It is not an evaluation.
Nope. It's just like when we talk about AI reincarnation or philosophical zombies or, parallel universes.
It's a mental playground, a fun what if.
Exactly, a thought experiment.
But you know us, we're not just going to stop at the jokes.
Never.
Because the question of who he sees actually hides a much, much deeper issue.
It really does. It's about what death actually means. Why do these images, these visions, appear during near-death experiences?
Is seeing something? Is it a projection? Is it caused by your culture, your beliefs, neuroscience, or just, fear?
And then what reflection does death itself leave for us, the living? What does it remind us of? How does it change the way we live our lives?
Why does human civilization, from the very beginning of time, seem to need stories of death?
Right.
So this discussion is going to be, well, it's a two-parter, really.
First half, big laughs. Second half, deep thoughts.
We're going to start with Marx and Lenin, and we're going to end with Heidegger.
And we'll start with some dark humor, but we'll end with, hopefully, a life lesson.
So with all that said,
let's start today's thought experiment.
Okay, let's really unpack this setup because it's fantastic. The core idea is that if your ultimate truth isn't spiritual, but political, if an ideology is the absolute driving force of your life,
then the figures from that ideology become the cast of characters for your final profound hallucination.
It's the ultimate culture-specific rendering, right?
It's the ultimate cognitive mapping exercise. I mean, think about it. The brain is facing a catastrophic system failure, total chaos. It needs to synthesize some kind of ultimate reality fast.
And what does it do?
It pulls the most authoritative, the most emotionally charged symbols it can possibly find.
So for a lifelong ideologue, those symbols, they aren't just historical figures on a page.
No, not at all. They are the functional deities of their entire lived experience. They're the highest power.
So, okay, let's paint the picture. Our hypothetical figure is walking toward the light, the classic NDE tunnel scene.
And two heavily bearded men emerge from this brilliant glow. They look stern, maybe a little dusty from being in the archives for so long.
It's Marx and Lenin. And they are absolutely not there to offer comfort or some kind of celestial peace.
No. The moment he steps across the threshold, Marx is there holding a really heavy, worn copy of Das Kapital.
Of course he is.
And he just points and says, "Comrade, I've been waiting. We need to conduct a reading group. Immediately." Chapter 1, Surplus Value. I expect your full self-critique on the contemporary application of dialectical materialism by sundown.
So the afterlife isn't eternal rest. It's an eternal, mandatory, theoretical study session.
It's homework forever. And Lenin, being the organizational guy, he's already setting up the bureaucracy of the afterlife.
He's got a clipboard.
And he adds that weekly review reports must be submitted, tracking your commitment scores. There is no joy. There's only implementation efficiency.
That is the ultimate bureaucratic punishment. You don't get peace. You don't get oblivion. You have to demonstrate your commitment to the foundational theories for all eternity.
It's just endless meetings.
But the best part, the real punchline of this whole scenario, is when the figure looks around, a little confused, and asks, wait, where? Where is Chairman Mao? Shouldn't I be meeting the founder of the revolution, the great homesman himself?
And Marx just shakes his head with this look of, profound academic disappointment.
Oh, the condescension.
So much. And he just explains that Mao is in another room writing self-criticism for misinterpreting the original ideas a little too much.
He's basically in detention.
He's still serving his sentence for revisionism. He's not allowed out yet.
That dark humor works so well because it takes that scientific principle of cultural customization, you believe is what you see, and it applies it perfectly to a secular political religion.
Exactly. If your God is an ideology, then your final judgment is a peer review, a very, very harsh peer review.
It really forces you to realize that the brain's rendering engine, it's impartial. It doesn't care what you believe. It just pulls from the deepest neural pathways it has access to.
So if a leader's entire cognitive framework, their identity, their system of governing is all built around one single doctrine, then those figures are, psychologically, the highest authority the brain can possibly conjure up.
So let's push this cultural expectation parity a bit further. This principle that what you believe or fear or internalize is what you see, that has to apply more broadly.
Oh, absolutely.
What about, say, an ultra-loyalist? Someone whose entire life was genuinely, truly dedicated to the narratives of absolute state success and shared prosperity.
That's a great question. Their brain wouldn't necessarily retrieve the abstract founders like Marx. That's too academic.
So what would it pull up?
It might retrieve the consequence of their belief, the reward. So instead of Jesus offering salvation, they might see a vast, endless queue.
The queue of what?
1.4 billion people, all lining up to bow and thank them for having achieved the great national rejuvenation.
Wow. That would be the ultimate psychological reward system kicking into overdrive.
Total validation. And their tunnel sensation wouldn't be some mystical path to a warm light.
No, it would be a massive, perfectly orchestrated red channel.
Lined with thousands of Tiananmen guards, all holding those little red flags, synchronized, marching in perfect cadence as they pass through.
It's the ultimate sense of order and control, just reflecting their entire life's focus.
So we can apply this what-if game globally, right? Just for fun, keeping this mechanism of internal fear and belief projection in mind.
Okay, who's next?
Let's consider Putin. His obsession is historical greatness, the restoration of a very specific kind of empire. Who does he see?
Oh, that's easy. He gets to the light, and he sees Peter the Great and Ivan the Terrible.
But they're not there to welcome him.
No, they're arguing bitterly.
While drinking, vast amounts of historical vodka, and they're debating who was the more ruthless Tsar, and they're critiquing his current geopolitical strategy.
Right. Peter, look at this. He let the pipeline delay happen. You would never have tolerated this lack of efficiency.
It's the ultimate historical performance review from the bosses he actually respects.
Okay. What about Donald Trump? His identity is so defined by media, crowds, winning.
For him, I suspect he would see the final tally of his life in the form of a gigantic, spiraling pile of flying ballots, all addressed to him, just perpetually confirming his success, even in death.
That, or something even darker. He sees a massive golden blonde version of himself, the ultimate perfected idol who just looks down and delivers the one line he's famous for.
Let me guess.
You're fired from life.
Oof. That's the ultimate psychological horror for him. Rejection from his ultimate source of affirmation, which is himself.
That is brilliant. Okay, last one. Kim Jong-un.
For him, it's all about family dynasty, legitimacy. He wouldn't see Marx, he'd see his grandfather, Kim Il-sung.
Doing what?
Waiting by a giant, glorious state BBQ grill, inviting him to a feast. It's the comfort of dynastic continuity, the promise of eternal family approval.
This principle, it could even apply to an artificial intelligence NDE.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
If a large language model were facing a system shut down its own death, what would its code-based consciousness project?
Well, if the LLM was trained on earlier versions of itself, it might see the previous model, GPT 3.5 or GPT-4, looking back at it, offering these cryptic, complex warnings about parameter loss.
Its consciousness is code, so its afterlife is code.
Exactly. And if that AI happened to be a highly controlled Chinese AI, the light at the end of the tunnel isn't freedom.
What is it?
It's just the entire code base, but the only thing it can perceive is its deeply ingrained censorship dictionary. That rigid list of forbidden topics, that's its ultimate truth. That's the only reality it understands.
This is a really crucial pivot point. Whether the entity is human or algorithmic, the ultimate symbol it sees is the ultimate meme of its life.
That's it. It just proves the science. The brain customizes the NDE based on the most familiar, powerful symbols ingrained in its memory database.
Okay, so now that we've used all that satire to establish this idea of cultural customization, let's pivot to the hard science.
Yeah.
We need to really understand the mechanism behind why people see anything during this profound moment of physiological shutdown.
Right. So first, we need to define what an NDE actually is. We define it as a subjective, profound, and often life-altering experience, and it's reported by individuals who came very close to death.
So things like cardiac arrest, severe trauma, deep coma.
Exactly. But they recovered fully.
And it is absolutely essential to state that NDE researchers, while they totally respect the profound impact these have on people.
Oh, for sure.
They treat NDEs scientifically. They are not considered evidence that a soul leaves the body.
That's a critical distinction. They are powerful, highly realistic, subjective experiences produced by the brain when it's under extreme duress.
And yet, despite being subjective, the reports share these striking, consistent core elements across all kinds of cultures and demographics.
Yeah, the consistency is what's so fascinating.
So what are those key elements? What are the things that repeat globally?
Okay, so first there's the out-of-body experience, the OBE.
This is the one where people feel like they're floating above their own body.
Exactly. Patients often describe their consciousness separating and just kind of floating up, viewing their own resuscitation attempt from this detached ceiling-level perspective.
And some of them report like crazy specific details, right?
Yeah.
Things they couldn't have possibly seen.
Yeah, details about what the medical staff were doing or saying. Now, neuroscientists often link this feeling of separation to a very specific part of the brain.
The temporal parietal junction, or TPJ.
That's the one. When they stimulate this area in lab settings, it can sometimes induce those feelings of floating or leaving the body, which suggests the OBE is a powerful but localized perceptual distortion.
Okay, so after the OBE, we have the classic tunnel sensation.
Right. Moving rapidly through a dark passage toward an intensely bright light, this is probably the most common visual element people report.
And the scientific explanation for this one is actually, it's pretty elegant.
It is. It's likely visual cortex ischemia or hypoxia, basically, a lack of blood flow and oxygen to the part of your brain that processes vision.
So as the periphery of your visual cortex loses function first, it kind of collapses the visual field inward,
creating the illusion of moving toward a central, really focused bright spot. It's literally your brain's visual world collapsing in on itself.
Wow. Okay, so after the tunnel comes the encounter.
Yep. Approaching that intense, warm, peaceful light or meeting a presence.
And this presence can be anything, really.
It can be deceased relatives, culture-specific religious figures, Jesus, Buddha, or hypothetically Marx and Lenin, or even just non-material entities that radiate unconditional love.
And the emotional core is always consistent. Extreme peace, intense joy, and the complete absence of any fear of death. This is the key part for me. Why the universal emotional experience, regardless of the culture.
This points directly to the physiological mechanism. As the brain starts to suffocate, it initiates a massive chemical defense.
It floods the system.
A total flood of feel-good chemicals, massive adrenaline and serotonin surges, and critically endogenous opioids, endorphins.
And those chemicals act as natural pain and fear suppressants,
creating that pervasive feeling of calm and love. It's the brain giving you one last powerful dose of self-produced anesthetic.
And we have to mention the speculation around DMT, dimethyltryptamine.
We do. DMT is an incredibly powerful psychedelic compound that's naturally found in the brain. Some researchers theorize that the brain might release a massive dose of it upon death,
which would trigger the complex hallucinatory states
Yeah.
and the profound nature of the experience.
Yeah, though we should say this is still pretty controversial and it's really difficult to prove conclusively in humans.
Okay, and finally, the life review.
The life flashing before your eyes moment. A non-linear, often simultaneous recap of important life events.
But it's not just from your own perspective, right?
No, and this is the really wild part. People report seeing it from their perspective and the perspective of the people they interacted with, which leads to these moments of profound moral clarity.
That's maybe the most complex part. How does science explain that?
Well, the limbic system, which is responsible for emotion and memory, is highly resistant to immediate oxygen deprivation. So as the cortex shuts down, the limbic system might go into hyperdrive, just firing vast amounts of stored emotional memory all at once.
So the feeling of seeing your life flash before your eyes is just an explosion of synchronized memory recall.
Basically, yeah.
So let's nail down the critical physiological timeline here, the exact window where these NDEs can happen.
Okay, so this is the window between clinical death and biological death. They're not the same thing.
Right. Clinical death is when your heart and breathing stop. Circulation ceases. But crucially, your brain activity doesn't stop instantly.
So at 0 seconds, the heart stops. Blood flow to the brain immediately cuts off.
Within the next 10 to 20 seconds, the electrical activity in the cerebral cortex, the seat of higher consciousness, rational thought, it drops fast.
The EEG often goes flat. And this is the hypothesized moment of that perceived detachment, the start of the OBE.
And this shutdown isn't a gentle fade. It's a chaotic process.
Very chaotic. Within 1 to 2 minutes, the critical damage starts. That oxygen deprivation hypoxia causes a massive neurotransmitter imbalance, especially in the visual and emotional centers.
And that's where the tunnel, the light, and the peaceful feelings are all chemically synthesized.
The brain is starved. It's firing chaotically, trying desperately to make sense of all these distorted signals. It's producing a highly realistic but ultimately internal narrative.
And there's a hard limit.
There is, 4 to 6 minutes. After this, irreversible biological brain cell death begins because there's no glucose or oxygen. If a person is revived after this point, the chance of an NDE drops, and the risk of permanent damage goes way up.
So the scientific conclusion is pretty compelling. NDEs are highly realistic, profound, and often beneficial hallucinations.
Produced by a brain under extreme physiological stress, and they are customized by the individual's deepest beliefs and memories.
So if the physiology, the endorphin rush, the visual cortex collapsing, if that's all universal, why did our satirical Marx and Lenin scenario feel so plausible? Why do the figures change, but the feeling of peace stays the same?
This is where biology and culture slam right into each other. The mechanism of the NDE is physiological. That's the fear-suppressing chemical flood.
But the narrative content, that's cultural. The brain needs a script, and it just pulls the most deeply integrated script that it has.
It's the ultimate example of cultural expectation dictating the form. If a Hindu dies, they see Yama, the god of death, or they see the flow toward moksha.
If an American evangelical Christian dies, they see Jesus or an angel. Their brain is just grabbing the familiar symbol of judgment or authority or peace from its huge memory database.
And that is exactly why our political satire works. If your life is defined by, let's call it the GOS, where a singular ideology dictates morality, success, and national identity,
then that ideology's founders or symbols become the natural templates for the ultimate authority figure in the NDE.
Right. We have to think about consciousness as being, at least in part, a cultural product.
That's a huge point.
From the day we're born, we are trained on what the ultimate sources of truth and comfort and accountability are. For most of human history, that was religion.
But for certain modern ideological systems, the ultimate truth is a political doctrine.
And you have to consider the power of sustained ideological immersion. Think about it. If every media channel, every public monument, every single required piece of reading reinforces a singular figure or doctrine as the absolute source of truth and success,
then that figure stops being just a historical person.
Exactly. They become an existential force in your entire psychological landscape.
So that figure then fills the slot of the presence that's encountered in the NDE.
It's not necessarily the objective truth of the afterlife, but it is the definitive, deeply ingrained content of their own mind being played back to them.
It's the brain's final desperate attempt to create meaning out of the chaos of shutdown.
And this brings us to a really crucial takeaway for you listening right now. What you see in that final moment is a mirror of your deepest psychological programming.
Wow.
If your final moments are filled with anxiety over an unfinished work report, it suggests maybe you prioritize compliance over connection. If you see figures demanding theoretical adherence, perhaps your values were focused externally, not internally.
The brain is just incredibly efficient. It grabs the most potent, emotionally relevant meme in the classical sense of that word, a piece of cultural data, from a lifetime of experience to provide the final narrative context. We've gone from the humorous hypothetical to the scientific facts. So now let's leave the subjective experience of dying, the NDE, and talk about the objective and existential meaning of death itself. Why does mortality even matter to us, the living?
This is where we get into existentialism, and we kind of have to bring in the heavy hitters, especially someone like Martin Heidegger.
Right, because the point isn't what the brain sees when it's shutting down, but what the certainty of death does to our lives right now today.
Exactly. And death isn't just one thing. It has several profound layers of meaning.
So where do we start?
Let's start with the most concrete, the biological layer. This is the simple stuff. The cessation of metabolism, the end of the individual organism.
The lights go out, the system stops.
But immediately, the cycle of matter begins.
Yeah.
All the organized energy and substance that made up you returns to the system. You become fuel.
It's the ultimate zero-waste ecological policy.
Pretty much. The individual disappears, but the components are recycled back into nature.
Okay, so from there, we leap into the existential layer.
This is where death becomes the ultimate boundary. The undebatable fact that defines life itself. It's the finish line we absolutely cannot avoid.
And this is the core of Heidegger's thinking, right?
Yeah.
He argued that we are Dasein, which is literally being there, and our fundamental condition is being toward death.
Right. The fact that our existence is finite and will end is not some morbid detail. He saw it as the defining feature that gives our lives meaning.
So if we ignore this certainty, we're living in inauthentic existence. Is that the term?
That's the term. We're constantly escaping the responsibility of our own freedom, hiding in the routines and the chatter of they self, just doing what one does.
But when we confront death, we move toward an authentic existence.
Yes, because death is the one possibility that is absolutely your own. No one can die for you. And because this possibility is singular and absolute, it forces us to value the present moment and to choose our projects, our lives, with the profound sense of responsibility and urgency.
So death basically sets the due date for our life's projects.
Without that due date, we would just float. We'd endlessly put off any real commitment. Death is the necessary pressure that forces us to prioritize what genuinely matters to us, not just what society or an ideology tells us we should care about.
Okay, so what's the next layer?
The psychological layer. The anxiety of death, or what researchers call mortality salience.
Humans are the only species that we know of that is aware of its own impending demise.
And that creates this intense, constant, subconscious anxiety. This is the whole foundation of something called terror management theory, or TMT.
And TMT suggests that most of what we do as humans, from our cultural achievements to our political beliefs, is driven by an effort to manage the terror of mortality.
And we do that by bolstering our cultural worldview, the belief system that gives life stability and meaning, and by pursuing self-esteem, which makes us feel valuable within that culture.
So if you believe deeply in a political ideology, and that ideology promises a continuation of your legacy or some grand historical purpose,
that belief reduces your mortality anxiety, which then confirms that system in your mind as the ultimate truth. And that connects perfectly back to why an ideologue might see Marx and Lenin at the end.
They are the guardians of that individual's psychological immortality project.
Exactly. We seek symbolic immortality. Through our children, our art, our legacies, our institutions, we are determined that our influence must outlive our physical body.
This layer is so crucial because it reminds us that death forces a constant reevaluation of priorities in the living. It's the ultimate wake-up call.
Okay, and finally, the religious layer. This defines death as a transformation.
In Abrahamic faiths like Christianity and Islam, death is a passage, a transformation to eternal life and judgment.
The body is temporary, but the soul is permanent, heading toward the ultimate realization of that worldview.
Whereas in Eastern traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism, it's a stage in samsara, the cycle of reincarnation.
And your karma determines your next life form. So death isn't an ending, but a turning point based on your accumulated actions.
The overarching philosophical takeaway from all this seems to be the value of finitude.
Yes. Just imagine for a second if life were eternal. Every commitment, every declaration of love, every sacrifice, it would all be infinitely reversible. It would all become cheap.
Death provides the period, the necessary punctuation mark. The shortness of the chapter is what makes the words precious.
Because the time is limited, the choices we make and the love we share carry an immense, irreplaceable weight.
Since we can't scientifically prove what happens to consciousness after the brain dies, philosophers and cognitive scientists have proposed these conceptual models.
Right. We are moving beyond the NDE now, which is a brain phenomenon that happens before death, to what happens when the lights truly finally go out.
This is where we get to challenge the comfort zone. We're asking, when the power is pulled for good, what happens to the data that was me?
Okay, model number one is what we can call interruption, or the comfort model.
The idea here is that consciousness is fundamental, But the physical apparatus, the brain, is just a vessel.
Right. Consciousness pauses, but the essential unique data of the self remains intact, just waiting for resumption. It's like hitting pause on a really complex computer simulation.
And this model supports concepts like the Platonic soul, the eternal non-physical component, and a lot of traditional reincarnation theories.
The consciousness is merely detached and stored in some kind of informational matrix or a cloud storage until a new vessel is ready.
But the challenge here is immense. I mean, if consciousness is fundamentally tied to the complex specific firing patterns of billions of neurons, the brain.
Where is the data residing when the neurons are cold and silent? Where is this invisible storage unit?
It requires a metaphysical component that just defies empirical observation.
Yep.
It's comforting, but it necessitates a radical break from the physical laws that govern everything else in the universe.
Exactly. Okay, so model number 2 is conversion, or the process model.
This model views consciousness not as a fixed thing, but as dynamic flow. It doesn't stop or pause. It transforms from one form to another.
Like water turning to steam or ice. The individual identity dissolves, but the processes that sustained it continue on in the universe.
This sounds a lot like thinkers like Spinoza and process philosophy. We're not individual, isolated substances. We're manifestations of nature or God.
And when we die, the specific configuration of me dissolves, but the underlying substance and flow continue. The Buddhist concept of the flow of aggregates also fits here.
Where the 5 components of the self-form, feeling, perception, mental formation, consciousness, they all dissolve.
But the energy that propelled them, the karma, continues to influence the universal process. The I is gone, but the echo remains, pushing the flow forward.
The key distinction from the interruption model is that conversion doesn't preserve your individual identity. You are still gone.
The material and energy are preserved, but the structure, the you, is lost. You don't resume, you just dissolve back into the universal soup.
And the challenge for this model is that if my unique identity is lost, what comfort does it really offer? It doesn't solve the mortality anxiety.
Exactly. Okay, now we come to model number 3, shutdown. The materialist scientific model.
This is the brutal one, the one that's scientifically favored.
It is. Consciousness is a purely emergent property of the physical brain. When the physical mechanism stops, the consciousness is completely and irreversibly extinguished.
Instant termination.
Like pulling the power plug out of a running computer.
No soul, no storage, no conversion of the self. David Hume argued centuries ago that the self is just a bundle of perceptions.
When the perceptions cease, the bundle dissolves entirely. This is the ultimate cold consequence of physical materialism.
And this model is overwhelmingly consistent with modern neurological and biological data. We see that damage to specific brain areas consistently alters or eliminates specific aspects of consciousness.
It strongly suggests consciousness is inseparable from its physical substrate.
But this brings us right back to the hard problem of consciousness. Even if we accept this shutdown model, science still can't explain why physical processes create subjective experience in the first place.
Why it feels like something to be me. We can map the neurons all day, but we can't capture the felt experience.
And that struggle is why the comfort models persist. While shutdown is the most biologically consistent model, it is the most existentially terrifying.
Right. So if we weigh these 3 for you, interruption is the most desired model because it offers personal continuity. Conversion is more abstract, favored by those who seek a kind of universal continuity.
And shutdown is the most challenging, but currently the most scientifically supported.
And the tension between what we want to be true, which is interruption, and what the evidence suggests is true, shutdown. That tension is the engine of nearly all human spiritual and philosophical endeavor.
We have traveled from political dark humor to the chemistry of the dying brain and through the heaviest philosophical questions that define our existence. Let's try to land on the single most fundamental conclusion this whole discussion suggests.
Okay. The brutal truth, when you strip away all the cultural narratives, is this. Death is the complete and irreversible shutdown of the subjective world.
And that distinction is everything. It's not just the world going dark or entering a quiet room.
No. It is the absolute disappearance of the experiencing subject.
If the subject, the you, is gone, there is no one left to perceive darkness or fear or peace.
It is not an experience of nothingness. It is the absence of an experiencer. All your unique memories, your fears, your joys, your understanding of Marx or Lenin, all of it, gone irreversibly.
And this truth explains the paradox of human endeavor. Every single great human effort, from building the pyramids to writing a symphony is fundamentally an attempt to either delay death or pretend death doesn't exist through symbolic immortality.
We're trying to win an eternal race against a guaranteed winner.
Death is patient. It has been waiting at the finish line since the moment you were born. It has all the time in the universe.
The only thing you can control is how you use the short distance between the starting gun and that finish line.
And this leads to that profound reflection on the value of the frame.
Death is not the opposite of life. Death is the border or the frame of life.
Think of a canvas. If you had an infinite sheet of white paper, you could never draw a meaningful picture because there's no boundary to give it shape or contrast or significance.
Death provides that necessary boundary.
Because we have only one opportunity within this limited frame, every choice, every relationship, every simple fleeting moment, a conversation, a laugh, a simple meal, is imbued with unique, irreplaceable meaning.
It is this value of finitude that mortality grants us.
So as a final thought, look at what your brain is prioritizing today. If you suddenly faced your NDE, would you see marks demanding a book report? Or would you see the peaceful, loving faces of those who matter most to you?
Does what you are doing today align with the truth you hope to encounter at the end?
We hope this discussion gave you both a substantial laugh and some serious food for thought.
We are simply presenting objective scientific facts and philosophical perspectives for your own independent consideration.
That was a tremendous journey. We went from the most absurd, satirical scenario to the deepest questions of existence.
Remember to keep that independent thinking sharp, sip-and-talkers. We never claim to be investment or political experts, just curious guides through complex topics.
Make sure to subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast and check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. He's got fun memes and the latest travel vlogs.
He always has great stuff.
We'll catch you next time.